The country in which Israel shares the most border is Jordan. The border begins up near the Sea of Galilee and makes its way down to essentially the Jordan River, following the Jordan River downstream to where the river empties out into the Dead Sea, about 1,300 feet below sea level. As you continue south, the border, of course, goes through the Dead Sea, and then when you pick up the border from the southern edge of the Dead Sea, you follow a dry valley for over 100 miles as the crow flies, and this valley slowly rises from that low point of 1,300 feet below sea level to essentially sea level at the Gulf of Aqaba and at the city of Eilat. Now recently, Gidon and I had the opportunity to visit Jordan for the first time. I got up well before sunrise in Jerusalem, drove south to meet Gidon near Hebron. We continued on past Arad, and we got down to the Dead Sea Valley around sunrise. At this point, we stopped, and I had the wonderful experience of getting to see Gidon do his morning prayers. I don't usually get to see that because he is up before sunrise praying at sunrise, and then after sunrise as well. So it was fun to stop by the side of the road and take a 15-minute break or so while he donned his tefillin, he put on his prayer shawl at a certain point in the prayers, and just to be out there watching him do that in this dry, stark area, it was almost like watching a scene out of the Bible. Well, we continued on south for almost 100 miles till we got to the city of Eilat. And there we turned and crossed over into Jordan. And this is where we pick up our story for today, because the destination of this particular series is going to be the city of Aqaba. Joining me today are Bob and Valerie Parham, who live in a community in Aqaba, and I'm very excited to be able to introduce them, their community, and the city of Aqaba to you. All right, well, with me today are Bob and Valerie Parham from Aqaba, Jordan. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great, thank you.
So tell us, what is it like to live in Aqaba?
Well, I tell you what, it's awesome living here. The people are just wonderful people. They are top notch when it comes to hospitality. You can't go and do any kind of business without somebody offering you tea. And open a bank account, work on your car, buy furniture. You first have to sit and have tea. So the hospitality is unbelievable. Valerie and I have both been teachers here for several years, and the people have high respect for anyone who's been a teacher. And so Yahweh has given us a lot of favor with the people here, and we have just enjoyed that. You have to know that it gets very hot, up to 120, but it's somewhat dry compared to Texas or anywhere else that we've come from.
So it's 120, but at least it's a dry heat. Huh?
It's dry, so you can say if you're in the shade and a little wind, you're not sweating so much. But you get out and start moving around, you'll start sweating.
But wait, you're right next to the Gulf of Aqaba, right? So there's like an ocean there. Doesn't that moderate the climate?
You would think it would be more humid than it is, but it's actually really dry because we're right on the desert as well. And when people come here, you will find a lot of people getting sick with stomach problems or whatever, and it's dehydration. And they're sweating sometimes and not even realizing they're sweating. So we always recommend people put salt in their water or get the rock salt and sea salt and suck it under their tongue or whatever. But the sea sometimes adds humidity, but for the most part it doesn't.
So from the standpoint of Jordan as a country, we think about the refugee camps in the north, Syrians and Iraqis, fleeing from ISIS. The impression we have is one of a very dynamic and not necessarily safe. How do you feel in Aqaba?
That's a wrong impression. Why don't you tell them, Bill?
Crime-wise, there's less crime than there is in Israel, certainly less crime than there is in the United States. The deal is there's a principle, and the fact is that if the king has invited you into the country, and if you're a resident or a tourist or whatever, you have been invited in. Therefore, past religion, there's really the cultural thing, which is hospitality, and in the Middle East, it's actually really real. So this transcends even religion on many levels. The fact is that if the king has invited you in, no good Muslim in this country would actually do anything bad to you because of the fact that you have been given hospitality and by the highest level in the land.
Wow.
Therefore, any danger that would be to you would be mostly coming from, people who, don't even practice any kind of religion or whatever, or the people who are, who might be sneaking into the country from someplace else. Like, it's not going to be the regular local Jordanians that would be, normal harm to you in any way. So in that respect, we're actually pretty safe. There are some refugees here. Like when we came here, there were plenty of Iraqi refugees that were already here who have fled here at the different times that Iraq has been attacked. And mostly they've been Christian refugees that are here from Iraq. The Syrians now have joined it, but they haven't there are some here, but I think there's, what did Father Samia's church, weren't they only serving about 400 maybe Syrian refugees that some of the churches are actually helping? The people are Muslim, they're not Christian. There are groups in the north that are helping both the Syrian and the Iraqi refugees, but other than the camps that have just started as a result of the real Syrian war outbreak that you see pictures of on the news and internet, many of the refugees that have come into the country have just come into the country and gotten apartments in Amman or whatever. I mean, like they brought whatever money they could into the country and they've just filled up all the empty places. So you wouldn't necessarily know if you're walking by somebody if they're Syrian or Iraqi or they are a Jordanian. If we were really good at noticing everything from their headscarves to you name it, we'd be a little bit better, maybe at determining who's who. Like everybody wears a different colored headscarf. I'm not sure what the Syrians actually wear, but the Palestinians have the black and white, the Jordanians the red and white, the Saudis have a pure white kippah. So each of the groups actually from wherever they're coming from, they do have kind of their tribal colors in their head scarf coverings. But if they're just dressed like a regular Westerner, like most of the men do, you wouldn't necessarily know where they're from. So but they're in the country, not so much in Aqaba, because frankly they've kept the Syrians for the most part out of Aqaba. They want this to be this is a city that they want to eventually become like Dubai. It's a tourist city, and tons of huge hotels and things that they're putting in here, and they don't really want it marred by people who are of the refugee camp quality, that can't afford to make it in the country. However, it's very tough for the people who are listening, for those refugees, because there's so many restrictions, like even the Iraqi Christian refugees, they can't go to a public school. So if they don't go to a private, or a Christian school, they can't go to school. And, and just like it is in the States, the schools are expensive, if they have to pay for them. And then the parents often can't work. Even the Palestinians here, many of them can only do certain jobs. Like if you're a school teacher, for instance, and you're a Palestinian, you can't teach in a regular public school. You can only teach in the private schools. So lots of discrimination like that. If people want to talk about apartheid, there really is a kind of that goes on here.
But Aqaba as a city, so it sounds like Aqaba has a little bit of a different role than the average city in Jordan. It's it's an area for tourists. And if you say Dubai, do you mean that there are a lot of internationals that live there?
Yes. And the weekends, the city gets very busy from people coming in to play for the weekend, like from Saudi Arabia and other places. This is kind of, not trying to put it in a bad respect, but from a really, really staunch Muslim thing, this is kind of a sin city. Like, the Saudis can come here and, buy alcohol. They can't, they can't purchase it in Saudi Arabia. Because they don't have any, they won't let there be any stores that actually sell it. So the alcohol stores here are owned by the Christians, and they're quite wealthy that do that. And even though they have a small Christian population in the area, so the city, I think we had discussed earlier, the city's become very green since we've lived here. This is a tax-free haven in that you don't pay any customs on the things that you actually buy in this city area. It's a special kind of government here. For the people who, are looking at the possibility of the coming home thing, to be a resident here, basically you need $14,000 US in a local bank. You need a lease. So it's pretty easy to actually get residency, or if you could get a job, you could actually, do a work visa, although many of the Jordanians themselves are sitting here without jobs. So, best if you wanted to start a business, or, you have Social Security or some kind of other employment for yourself.
So now we can get a picture of why people are coming to Aqaba. If it only takes $14,000 in a bank account and an apartment lease, that's pretty easy. It seems to be an international city. It's sort of open to Westerners. So is the city growing? And how does it compare in size to Eilat across the way in Israel?
Yeah. Well, when we came here, and we moved here in 2005, and there were about 60,000 people here then. Now there's 160,000 people here. And it's growing by leaps and bounds. I mean, even the Google pictures of when we first came here, if you do a satellite thing for the whole world, I don't know if they've changed it lately, but a few years ago when we were looking, they still had the pictures from 2005 on the satellite, and it's like you can see that there's a big difference in what's been built since we've been here. Plus, they're making it green. It never rained when we first came because they didn't plant stuff, and some of the original people, some of the Americans that came were encouraging the government here to start planting trees, because if you plant enough, it will rain. Like, we could stand here in Jordan, we can see right into Eilat from where we live, and you could see it raining in a lot, and it never would cross the border, which is really funny. Well, now it actually crosses the border because they finally planted enough trees, and when you're driving down the streets, it's green in the middle, and the people are starting to plant inside their little garden areas outside their apartments and things. And so it is actually beginning to rain, and that's more normal than not now.
That's amazing. It's wonderful to hear that. So the desert is blooming not just across the way in Israel, but also in where you live in Aqaba.
Absolutely.
Sounds like scripture, doesn't it?
It kind of does. Now,
yeah.
You've described the city as, being comprised of mainly Arabs from some international, some from Jordan, and a few refugees. What about the non-Arab population, the Christian, let's say, population? How many how many Christians might live in Aqaba?
The Christians might be about 20%, you think? Would it be that high?
No, I don't think it'd be that high.
Somewhere between 10 and 15%, possibly at least. In our schools that we worked in, at the Rosary School is a Christian school, and but it was at least 85 to 90% Muslims versus Christians, and even the teachers were more Muslim than Christian.
Right. And when you say Christian here, you're talking about sort of ethnic heritage, right? Not necessarily going to church every Sunday, right?
Right. Their families were Christian. They were born into Christianity, and so that's what they were instead of Muslim. There might have been 1,350 students that were maybe Muslim, 200 Christians out of the school. So
now,
just to give you an idea.
And the teachers 10%.
Okay. So my last question in this segment is I want to just ask you. You live in you also have a community of Jesus followers that you sort of hang with. How big is that community in Aqaba?
Well, the total group, there's probably close to about 100 people here that are somewhat Hebraic roots, all the way to very still much in the church, and so different levels. In the local group that we hang out with the most, we're probably an average of 25 to 30 or so. But there's several different kind of groups here, and but that's basically what meets at our home. We have about 5 meetings here in our home each week.
That's wonderful. And Gidon and I were so privileged to be hosted at your home. We came, and I think you had a brunch, and people came in, and we got to meet some of the folks from the community, and it seemed like a real sense of camaraderie and also a love for the Lord and even an appreciation for Israel.
Yes. And it's awesome to be around people who have that kind of love for Israel. And so it makes it easier to be here.
Well, when we come back, I want to ask Bob and Valerie to tell us a story of how they ended up in Aqaba. So hope you hang around for that and join our next segment. But until then, shalom.